Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. Today it's November 9th. It's 6:25 p.m. and recording this on my Chrome box. And my Windows 11 computer over here, I still cannot, and I've given up on it. I cannot get the audio to work. I mean, I can hear, Netflix and YouTube, all that type of stuff. I just can't record anything. It just comes out static. And I've tried a whole bunch of things, and nothing works. And I think I mentioned in yesterday's video a little bit that I was thinking of different things that I could do, and one of them I haven't decided yet. One of them was buy one of these little recorders that records audio. Maybe a lot of young people use them in when they go to college to record lectures and stuff like that. And that would mean that I would have to, I would record the video, and then I would, as I was recording the video, I guess, I could be using the recorder, and then I could go at the end of the video, use the audio and try to match it up. I'd have trouble matching it up to begin with, so it was in sync. So that's one thing I'm thinking about doing. If I had the money, I'd just buy a new computer. I'd even go for a rehabbed unit. I never have done that, but I've watched a bunch of videos about that, and then I've looked at sales. Even Amazon sells. What happens is some company, it could be a hospital, it could be any kind of a business, they may have 10 computers that they use. Might have 25, might have 50, might have 100, and they make a deal, and a company takes those and refurbishes them, fixes them up, cleans them good, and does all that type of stuff, and then they sell them. And the price is, if you look on Amazon, and they get some really good reviews, but I'm sure also they're going to get, some company is going to, some group that bids on it or takes it, I'm sure they're not going to be, because I've read reviews where somebody got, one that they paid for not much money. But, they got, some of them, people got something that it wasn't cleaned and it wasn't, wasn't fixed up the way it should be. But then a whole bunch of, reviews, people raved about it, just fantastic. It was fantastic. They got a great deal. I've never done anything. I've even shied away, not shied away, I just, I like my computers, my cell phones, things. I don't want something that's, scratched up or something. I want it new. I'm sure that they refurbish things like that Amazon sells through their company, whatever they call those things, where things are and the truth, they have, like, if you're not happy with it, send it back and whatever. But I still have never been, even though I'm poor, I've never been one who wanted to buy something used. I can't think of anything that I bought used. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, except this is going to be it for a little bit. If you've been, my throat hasn't given out yet. I'm somebody who's talked for, made hour videos, hour and a half videos, 2-hour videos, and never had any problem non-stop talking. And for the last week or so, I don't know exactly, I'm not good at remembering, like, if I had a pain someplace and then I go to the doctor or something. You know, where's the pain? Well, you know, how long have you had it? Well, I don't, you know, I'm just not, I'm focused more on external stuff than myself, which is not good. You ought to be, you know, hey, if you're having some type of a problem, you know, I just postponed I get seen by the doctor about every 6 months. But sometimes I don't have you know, I go for 2, 3, 6 months, you know. I only see the doctor maybe once a year type of thing. I just was due, I think was due tomorrow to have my checkup with my doctor, and I postponed that till January. So in January I'll see 2 doctors, my regular doctor, and I'll see the cardiologist that calls me, and they call me in for once a year to go in. I've had 2 pacemakers put in, and I think the first pacemaker lasted about, because the thing is the battery. How long is the battery going to last? And my pacemaker runs all the time, of course. I mean, you know, it's sending out, you know, to keep beating, and so. By the way, since I'm an old man, and since the statistics that YouTube give me and show me, you know, that all YouTubers, you can go and get an idea of who's coming, all types of static, all types of information, a lot, more than I can manage to know how to properly use, you know. But one thing they give you is your demographics on who comes, and I guess they don't, you know, they count under 18, they don't, you know, all these, when you make a video here, they ask, is this going to be, you know, for children or anything, you know, and it's, so, and it's never, you know, no, I'm not making any videos for, you know, children. And, but so the demographics for me is 18 years of age to, I think it's 30 years of age. And it's like 100%, you know, which of course it's not, but it shows up like 100%, you know. But, and sometimes it's like 99%, all male between the ages of 18 and 30. So I guess I should, and I've done this before, you know, save money. I've talked about that. I'm not good at that, by the way. I am terrible at that. I love to spend money. I don't have money to spend, but I love to spend money. You know, I got over 5 sound cards, external sound cards. I have, oh my God, I don't know, 7, 8, maybe 9, 10, probably 10 microphones. There's 1 monitor, 2 monitors, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there's more than that, but there's six monitors at least. I like messing and playing with things, you know, like that. I'm one of those people. Anyway, you know, save your money. Try to save. I know maybe they've changed it, but the experts say, you know, in addition to, you know, if you're in the United States, you know, when you work, taxes, they take out some taxes for Social Security and for Medicare. Social Security is your retirement money that you get when you turn. It used to be 65. I think now it's 67 or something like that, I think. And then the other is for your medical insurance. And now don't do what I did. You know, I worked for these different companies, and of course I was paying in for, you know, Social Security and Medicare. But I also paid in, and it varied from companies that I worked at. I paid in voluntarily to, a tax sheltered annuity and different things. I think there were always maybe a tax sheltered annuity. And I don't think all of the places did, but maybe I know some of the places, whatever I paid in, up to a certain amount, the company matched and put in, stuff like that. Let's see. I know 2 companies that I quit, and maybe it was more, where when I quit, I cashed that in, those, tax shelter annuities, which is stupid, but because I would have more, coming in than I do now. In money when I'm 81 years of age now, And then the other thing is, I worked all my life, and I worked at hard jobs. Now my wife and we had a tropical fish shop for 4 years, and that was, she took care of the smart stuff, the ordering of the fish and the plants and that kind of stuff. And I was behind the counter, and then I was also cleaning fish tanks, setting up fish tanks, and doing all kinds of stuff like that. And then we also had after that we had a patrol service, security patrol service or whatever. And we had that for a little bit over a year. And financially we made it. The only problem was with that, we had enough money coming in to buy groceries and pay the rent and do all those type of things. But we just had one vehicle, and that puts miles on it, and there just wasn't any way, I could see there wasn't any way that I was, if I had to turn around every, I don't know how long, I guess Uber drivers and Lyft drivers probably know about that type of stuff, and other people. So I just knew that, couldn't make it. Now my ex-wife, but my wife, her father owned for years, a long time, he owned a successful tavern, and in the beginning, before I met her, he had a restaurant, and he served, alcohol. And then he just decided, hey, I make this amount of money, and I guess he was a good cook, really good cook, according to Darlene. And people came all over for his food. And he told her, or whatever, hey, on this steak, whatever the other things that go with it, all that kind of stuff, he'd make I don't know, I don't remember the exact amount, $1.50 or something. But every time somebody took a shot of whiskey or something, he was making a couple bucks and stuff like that. So anyway, now both my parents were alcoholics, and I had I don't drink, never have, I never drank, and don't like drinking really. Of course, I spent 30 years hospital security and spent I don't know how much time, in the emergency room of the hospital, dealing with, drunks and stuff like that. So, but anyway, when they had the tropical fish shop, I didn't even mention anything to the wife at that time. I knew that I could go to her father and say, hey, could you give me the money to purchase a brand new vehicle or whatever for the patrol service? And I know he would have done it because I was married to his daughter, but I couldn't, I just couldn't bring myself to do that. In the 12 years that Darlene and I were married, and when I patrolled the area I was patrolling, by the way, when I started the patrol service, like the other companies, like there was a company that out in Overland Park, and they had, I don't know, I'm not sure if all of them were ready to work, but they had maybe 10 cars, you know, painted and marked. And I really like the, nobody wants to do that anymore. They had the spotlight through the roof, by the, you know, right behind the, on the roof, behind the windshield. And that was so easy to grab that thing and shine it just right where you wanted it to go. I love that about their cars. They also had a thing in the, this was before really, well not before computers, but they also had in each car a big thing in the back, in the trunk, and there was a piece of paper that went in there. And then all that information that when you were driving was, you know, how fast you were going, when you stopped, the time, all that type of, that was in the trunk of their vehicle, you know. And to record that information, stuff like that. But what they did, because they called on me first, because okay, that's back when I was working full-time job, and working, no, that's right after the, we sold the tropical fish business. Anyway, I'm getting it to a long time ago. But, so I worked full-time, well later on, full-time hospital security, and then part-time contract security on my days off or whatever, so I was working all the time. But I worked for that patrol service in Overland Park for a little while. And first they, you know, they hired me in, and I didn't ask them, you know, they put me at a art institute. You know, Darlene even went to it for a short period of time. You know, art, whatever art is, you know, all this type of stuff. And so I got hired in by this guard company, and they sent me to the art institute to watch. And they didn't have, it wasn't like, you know, a big, they had a few rooms with artwork up. And I was to stand there and make sure nobody did anything to them or stole them. I don't think anybody was stealing them. There weren't any Van Goghs or anything like that. You know, it was, and I wasn't there very long. And then they called me to go out to Overland Park, and so I showed up out there, and they said, "Well, we're going to have you." Well, I went in there, and their lieutenant or captain or whatever he was, you know, he was a prick, and that's why I quit. And there was another one of their employees there. And this is back in the old days. They had a Radio Shack telephone answering machine. And of course they had the remote control with it. And this is before, you know, I'm not sure, well, anyway, that remote control, they were calling other security guard services, patrol services, and they could use that remote control to retrieve the messages on those people, which would be a federal crime, you know, by the way. And they were getting their messages and writing it down, or, you know, and then calling those people. Oh, we understand you may be interested in blah, blah. I don't know what they said exactly, but I thought, my God, these people are really, you know. So anyway, they had me, and so they had me patrolling Overland Park, Kansas. The entire thing. There was nobody else patrolling that area. And then I also patrolled a smaller town, Olathe. And I mean, it was, you know, there was no way that you could do that job properly. Now, when I had my patrol service, after working for them, I had a small area. I could, at night, roll the windows down on the car, and if glass broke, you know, a few blocks away or whatever, I could, you know, I could hear that or whatever. I did it the right way. They didn't. The reason I quit them, well, the reason I quit them is that, you know, walking in there and seeing them doing that too, and then there was a few times I would run into another patrol service patrolling, like me, a single, person doing it, not a bunch of people. And they mentioned that, this other company had retrieved their messages or whatever, and they mentioned other things that that those people, did. But anyway, I quit. They, I see my throat thing is coming back. Maybe I should have went ahead and seen the doctor, and not put it off a couple months. But this may help you. You may stop getting really long videos from me. Anyway, this company, whatever it was, he gave himself rank. You could be, I could have made when I had I could have put anything on my lapel that I wanted to, You see some of these on the news sometimes. You'll see some sheriff of a really, really small area, or maybe even a police officer with a really small department, and the guy will be wearing, 5 stars, like a 5-star general, or 4 stars, or whatever. And that's fine. They can be that if they want, if they want to. Who care? I care, I see when I be watching the news story and I'll see the chief of police or something. I think, God, if you got a small department, make yourself a captain, and increase your rank when you have. If your department gets bigger, then you'd have sergeants anyway. And then, then you'd have a lieutenant, and then you could have a captain. And, at some point, if you've got a vast city or something, but 5 stars, 4 stars, or whatever. I even went one time because I was always, for years, working full-time hospital security and then part-time security. And I didn't do that the entire 30 years. Eventually, but I went into this place one time, went in, to apply. Well, they'd advertise. They always advertise. And there was a guy in a, suit, and he was the general manager of the thing, And then behind the counter, there was a guy, and he had, I think he had captain bars on. And then there was another guy, and that guy was the guy who handled, like, the office stuff. Or, and when a new employee was hired in, he made sure they got a uniform and they signed for it and all this kind of stuff. Then the other guy was the guy in charge of the officers who were put in warehouses or doing the patrol service type thing or whatever, and he was, I think, a colonel or something, or he had that on, which is, But anyway, I'm there filling out the form, and I'm thinking, I got a bad feeling about this. And so I'm hearing what's going on there in the office. There was other people applying. And the owner, or the man, I guess he could have been, it could have been his place, or he could be, well, they didn't have a name like Burns, Pinkerton, Wells Fargo, into that, so I'm assuming that maybe this is his business. Like I had a one-man patrol service, so he's entitled, But the guy who works, in the office, like when he had rank, he had a uniform on, he had rank. And then and I forget now, after all these years what it was, the manager said to him, why did you issue these uniforms to these new officers and not have them sign? Or, no, it was something else, something where there would be a little bit of, where this guy should have been more aggressive in something. I can't forget what it was, because of the guy's excuse that I can remember. And he said, well, I can't do it. And, well, why can't you do it? Well, he's a colonel, the other guy, he's a colonel, and I'm only a captain. And the guy says, you're in charge of the office, you're in charge of, all this, blah, 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 all this stuff. and he takes care of the outside, you know, takes care of the, you know. Well, I'm only, I thought, oh God, and I just, I got up and left, you know. 25 minutes so far. Gonna jump back. I don't know what to, things were really, you know, working out good. This, you know, this video, I mean, the camera, and it's I'm using now the really inexpensive one. I've got the, and I've got, oh, that's another thing, you know, I've got, I think maybe I mentioned, I don't know, I think I mentioned, I must have at least 10 cameras, probably more than that, not in use, you know. So, you know, don't know. Oh, I was talking about, yeah, since you're all a bunch of young whippersnappers or whatever, don't be dumb like me. Also, I thought that I was, I never went to the gym. Well, I did sign up like a couple of times for a gym. Once was at the hospital, and the gym was right there. It wasn't a real fancy one, but the gym was right there. And I thought, hey, after work, you know, after work I went home, went to bed, you know, especially since I was working, you know. Well, I worked around, you know, different shifts, but generally I worked, you know, second shift or the midnight shift, or as it's called the graveyard shift or whatever. One reason was to get away from the Monday through Friday supervision, you know, the executives or whatever. I just, something in me, and has always been there, of I have problems with those kind of people, and there's some things that kind of set me off, which it shouldn't. That was a defect with me. But I mean, I was always right. You know, that's a defect, I'm sure, telling you that I'm always right. I mean, not about everything, but about work and stuff like that. Part of that is, I mentioned this before, I think in a video, that when I got out of high school, my intention was to go in the military and serve 20 years in the military. I was 40 pounds under minimum weight requirement. They wouldn't take me. Kind of sad, because I went to a military high school, an academy, because I wanted to go in the military, and there was no girls at that school. If I'd have known that you know, that there was going to be, I knew there was no girls there, but I went there because of the military. If I had known, I could have gone 4 years, you know, to a Catholic high school with Catholic girls in those little, you know, in those uniforms. And then I found out later on that girls that went to those schools, you know, that went to schools, and I think it was the same time I was in high school, I'm sure it was, that, you know, they could come from gym class or cheerleading class or whatever, and come to, you know, the room, you know, the rooms or whatever, in their outfits. I would have loved that. I'd have been masturbating all the time. Well, I masturbated all the time anyway. Can we back that up and cut that part out? No, we can't. I'm lucky to get it recorded. I don't have anybody helping me, of course, with this. And none of my family, I don't blame them, none of my family wants me to say anything about the family, about them, or about really anything. Kind of makes it difficult for me, because, well, you can tell by my storytelling. That's the thing too, I think I mentioned that maybe a few times. This one hospital, small hospital, right out in my community, where I lived. That was great. 9 years, 9 years I worked there. I could almost see where I lived. I love that, because in the past, all those years I had to drive, you know, all the way across Kansas City, Missouri, to Kansas City, Kansas, and just all this, you know, places I worked, I had to drive. and in storms. And then the one hospital that I worked at for 5.5 years, after about 2 years, the director of security decided that we should take over doing snow removal. And he called all the supervisors together, so I was there. I told you this before. And then he left me for last. He was a smart man, and I really liked him, but he drove me crazy. And I just couldn't take it anymore. And it was all, it had been all, it got to so bad, but it had been arranged, one thing he gave me, one reason I liked him, he gave me the most amazing reviews when he reviewed me. Couldn't have given anybody a better review than he was giving me. But it just got where I didn't know till just the last few years about the mental problems that Donald Trump has. And then there was books and people on TV and talking about, about Donald Trump and then his diagnosis and that type of stuff. And of course, Republicans or whatever say, well, you can't diagnose somebody unless you treat them. You can't just by the way they react and that type of But anyway, this guy that I worked for back in 1975 to 82 or something like that, I really did like him, but he did stuff that, oh my God. And a lot of people would be able to just ignore it, or else use him. I saw other people using the director of security. And the way to do that was just flatter him and go along with no matter what he said. We had a guy at the hospital who worked in maintenance, and luckily he worked on the second shift by himself, and he was seriously mentally ill, and you were allowed to, have a gun in your car. That's a lot of businesses have that. Well, you can have it in your car, but you can't bring it inside. Well, he, of course, was not allowed to bring it inside. And nobody else was allowed to bring one in. And then we were warned, the administration had warned the director of security, and he passed it on to us. This guy is seriously dangerous. Be very careful in any dealings you have with him, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And then a month or two after that, the director of security just happened to mention, he said, so-and-so, he came to me, and he says he didn't feel good having his gun out in the car. Somebody might steal it or something. So he asked permission to, to bring it inside and keep it in his locker inside, in the department where he worked. And I knew what was coming by that time. And he said, I gave him permission. And I don't know what okay, whatever. Because all you had to do, he bragged about everything, the way Trump does, how much the director of security bragged about how much money he had. And he bought a brand new Cadillac. He brought it to he drove it to the hospital, of course, where he worked. He parked it for a while right outside the emergency room entrance there. And then he went in and brought out all the department heads who were willing to come. I'm sure there's some of them probably said, get the fuck out of my office, but he would bring them out and show them his Cadillac and all that kind of stuff. So all you had to do was, flatter him. Or say, it'd be easy, all you'd have to say is, well, boss, I mentioned his name. If you watch my videos, I mention his name 1,000,000 times. But anyway, boss, I know you can't give me permission to do such and such. I know you don't have the authority to do that, but, and then he would, the boss would have said, oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, you just go ahead and you do that. That was the type of stuff I saw them use on him. But he thought he knew everything, and he was really smart, but he had the same things, all the things that Donald Trump does. Of course, this guy was in the military, and he wasn't stealing stuff like from the White House, top secret documents or whatever, but when he was in Germany, and he was an officer, of course, which he would have loved. He escorted now he made some other duties, but I mean, he was the military police, and his unit escorted the atomic cannons when they were being moved around Germany, And I know, because I've worked with him, he would have, that would, shutting down the road, pushing vehicles out of the way, whatever, he would have done that. And, but I did 4 grievances on him, and I won all 4 of them, and he couldn't believe it. But then he got where he did believe it, and but a bunch of those, several, maybe 2 of those times that I did a grievance, he was telling like how important he was one time, and I did a grievance, and won, and that other stuff, other stuff like that. But it got where he finally got to me. I just could not. If I had known about Donald Trump, and if the people had written books and that type of stuff about, if I had known there was a condition that, that a mental condition, I would have just quit. I mean, because I was trying to help him when I did the grievances. No, you can't do that. It goes against hospital, human resources rules. You can't do it, and he would still insist that he could, do it. And to the director of human resources, the person who enforces, stuff like that. When I would do the grievance, I'd have to go first to, I think I said his name, go to Mr. Ross, the director, and then he would, and I would, then I would go to human resources, which was next. And he'd say, he was a really good man, the director of human resources. And he agreed with me every time on my grievance. That's one reason. No, that's not a reason. He did a good job and a fair job, and I don't think he had any problems, mental problems, Or if he did, he covered them up, But, I'd go to him and he'd say, Jim, I told him that, this is hospital policy, and he can't do that. And he said, and he said, I'm sorry. I said, not a problem. I just go to the next step up, the boss over him, boss over the director of security. And but so I would have tried with Mr. Ross. I did try, but it got where I was going to lose it. Like towards the end, I'd already been. Oh, by the way, I had already been arraigned, and Mr. Ross was, I told Mr. Ross, that like I was a supervisor, and I told him, I said, you're driving me crazy. I can't take you, I can't take you anymore. And I think maybe, I forget what the reason was. I think I wasn't wearing my sergeant's things. I was still doing my job and doing it damn well. In fact, when he wrote my merit reviews, they were fantastic. I missed those because the next hospital I went to work at, I think the director of security there made a mistake. I think he had maybe in his drawer, because he was a horrible person. But I think in his drawer he must have had a couple envelopes, and one must have been marked never hire, and the other one was, hire or something. And my name was, I'm sure, in the do not hire, and he must have got it wrong because he hired me. My God. But it was arranged at the where Mr. Ross was the director of security. When I told him, I said, I can't take you, sir, I cannot take you anymore. You're driving me over the edge. And he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to look for work elsewhere, And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I forget what I said. I said, I don't know. I didn't tell him that I'd had a whole bunch of, I didn't tell him that I had been a Boilermaker, that I had been a Boilermaker, been a welder at numerous companies. I'd worked for the post office. But my wife and I had a tropical fish shop, and then we had a girl. I didn't tell him any of that stuff. There wasn't any. I didn't do that kind of stuff. A lot of people did do stuff like that, I was working, not that hospital, but the next hospital I went to work with, and it was a bigger hospital. And that director of security hired me by mistake. In fact, I was avoiding his calls. I had a telephone answering machine, and he was leaving messages. Please, Jim, give me a call. I've got a job here for you, or whatever. I never called him. So I was a reserve police officer for I don't know how many years. And the director of security at that hospital called the chief of police at the city that I was, because they'd been in the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department together, and he called him. And this director of security also lived in in Raymore, Missouri, where I was a reserve officer. So anyway, I went in to do my patrol service, at Raymore PD, and the chief of police says, Jim, real nice guy, by the way, real nice. He was a sergeant with the police department and retired, Kansas City, real nice guy. And I came and he says, Jim, Mr. Ross has been trying to get hold of you. He's got a job for you. He's got a job for you. And I said, I don't want to. He says, well, he's been leaving messages. I said, I'm not answering his messages. I don't want to, Jim, he lives. He's like, I know where he lives. I don't like him, but I drive by his place to kind of keep an eye on it for you. And he said, well, we were in the police department, and he got me this. He talked to the mayor or something. He got me this job. And so anyway, I ended up going to work for the guy. But that was a big mistake. I made a lot of big mistakes. How many minutes is this? Let's go for an hour. So if you want to bail out, go ahead and bail out. I think right now I'm going to go for an hour. It might be good for my throat. Unblock whatever's causing me to. One of the, that guy I told you about, not Mr. Ross. I actually liked him. Oh, by the way, I worked, what was it, 18 years at that hospital. Now, after 5 years, that director of security that I hated so much, he quit. And so and the guy that came in, everybody, all the other 24 security officers, when the new guy came in, who had been a sergeant on the Lee Summit Police Department, a nice town. I didn't go there a lot, or whatever. I had family that lived out there and stuff. And he had an education. I'm guessing probably a bachelor's degree at least in police, administration. And one of our security officers had a master's degree in it, and he was just a security officer. I admired that officer because we worked together. In fact, he worked for 2 days a week, or later for years. He worked out with me at the small hospital. His first name was Khan, I didn't know that he had a master's degree until the new director of security at some point put out a thing, write down how much education, probably some other things too, so he would have an idea. And Con was the only one who had a master's degree, and I don't think very many of the guys had even a bachelor's degree in police science or something. I didn't. I'd taken a bunch of college classes, but I didn't bother to take, I only took police things. I didn't bother to take psychology. Well, maybe that's something that might be helpful, I don't know. But no, I didn't. I just took the police science courses. And so you don't get it, you have to, in order to get a, associate's degree, you'd have to have, English or something, and mathematics course or two, and that kind. I just took the police science ones. And then also this Con, we got in a new head ER doctor. They changed to this small hospital. They had some really good ones, and then they had a couple that were bad. But like with this one doctor, when he showed up, and then, so, we, at that hospital, the size of the hospital and what was going on, the factor, so I spent probably about 80% of my time in the emergency room. I made, quick trips through the hospital and around the hospital. It was a small hospital. So we were all like a family, especially in the emergency room. Anyway, when this doctor came in, who I liked, although I'm not going to say negative things about him, but one of the first things he asked me, he says, "Jim, were you in Vietnam, in the military? Were you in Vietnam?" I said, "No." I said, I didn't serve in the military. They wouldn't take me. I was 40 pounds on a minimum requirement. And then, he asked, we didn't work together, but Con, he asked Con, and Con said, "Yeah, I was in Vietnam, in the Army," and he told him, I was a clerk, I mean, he didn't have to say that. He could have just said, "Yeah, I was in, whatever." So Con had some, plus points. Those were two things that I never told him. Those were a couple of things I really admired about him, But the 9 years that I worked at the research, Belton Hospital, there were a lot of times, it was quiet. So I told a few stories, and I don't know what word to use because you'll see, stories was not something, I told a few stories about things that were all true. I'm somebody, what's it called, Socratic? My daughter's husband, he'd know because he taught. He has a master's degree in psychology. I think that was it. When I went out there for the 2 weeks, I didn't actually do it on purpose or whatever, but it just worked out. But he took it well. I rode with him. He did the grocery shopping, and I didn't know he went to 3 or 4 different places to get the stuff that they were vegetarians, Anyway, or I wouldn't have gone with, but he enjoyed it so much, So anyway, I went with him, and so then we were talking, and I said something. Well, I said, "Well, you've got a degree in what did I say? I didn't say psychology. Wait a minute. No, not psychology. It's stuff like, the Roman, the ancient, whatever that. Anyway, I said the wrong thing. No, Jim, you should know. My degree is in whatever. And I said, oh, it doesn't matter, they all start with a P. And he laughed, which was unusual because we had a little bit of a, he visited when I was living in Carrollton, Texas. And I knew that, oh, he did not like religion at all. I mean, he has a thing with religion. And I knew to avoid that subject with him. And whatever. And I'm not religious. I mean, I went to Catholic school. I was an altar boy. No, I wasn't molested, by the way. It kind of pisses me off. I was a cute kid. Why did I get skipped over? I'm kidding. So he said we were having dinner. And so then he brought up these things. He just had to bring them up. That's when Mother Teresa, the nun, had passed away or whatever. And then I followed, like, I had, back then I think I had all the channels, and I'd watch all the, the channels, not the sports channels or whatever. And I knew about this guy because I'd seen him interviewed before, a guy who was anti-religion and was a renowned author on the subject or whatever. I'd seen him interviewed and stuff. I was not impressed. And so, my son-in-law mentioned a couple things and I let it pass. And then he said, oh, so-and-so, and he mentioned the writer, So-and-so has written about Mother Teresa, and I forget what he said. I mean, he said some really bad stuff about her. And then I didn't yell or scream or anything like that, but then I responded to it. And then I didn't leave in the middle of dinner. I mean, I finished up and went downstairs to my room, which was also there was a computer down there and a TV and all that. So then he came down, and he wouldn't let go of the subject. And then, I didn't threaten him or beat him up or anything, but it did not go well. And so then he told LaDonna, his wife, my daughter, let's go. And so that was their second day there. And I think it was like 7 p.m. or something like that. And I know that she was, planning on staying there and visiting with the family, with Darlene, her daughter, and with Russell, her nephew, I guess, and I mean, and anyway, he said, we're going now. So I guess they went back to their hotel room, and so, but anyway, when they invited me years later to go to Washington, D.C. for a couple of weeks, I had an idea that LaDonna, of course, my ex-wife, don't talk about it, don't. I said, I know, I'm just going to let it roll off my back or whatever. I got there, and he could not have been nicer to me, and he did not mention religion at all. And I didn't say anything bad about, vegan food. And the truth is, by then, when they started out becoming vegans, they were, sold on the product the way religious people get. And that's one of the things I mentioned. Oh, when we had this confrontation, whatever, I don't know if he said, I'm not religious. And I said, yes, you are. Your religion is, being a vegan. I said, there's no difference. the religious people, every opportunity, they preach their, thing to you. Oh man, that's when so, but anyway, I went there, he could not have been nicer, and I'm sure that LaDonna said, don't, and, and anyway, there's not a lot of people that like him. I think I can say that because, of course, I don't know him, but I don't think he, because the way he is, he's, well, about religion. What percentage of the American people is that going to turn off? I mean, stuff like that. But anyway, so when I was there, we sat out on just him and I sat out. I even drank a beer, just, he likes wine. The entire 2 weeks I was there, he was opening up at dinner. He, said, I'm gonna find a wine that you like. Well, he didn't, But I sat out there and had a beer or two, not two at the same time, but on the patio, and he enjoyed that, and we talked. He asked me, some questions. He said, "How long were you and Darlene, engaged before you got married?" And anyway, I was always honest about everything. Well, you're not going to like this, and I forget, after 2 weeks or whatever, we decided we were going to get married. But we had to wait a little bit longer so the banns could be posted, in the church. They announced in the church, I don't know how many Sundays, I think it's maybe one, so-and-so and so-and-so are going to be married, on such and such a date. But, and that didn't, upset him. I mean, he kept it to himself. But he told me how he dated LaDonna, how long, and stuff. And I said, well, that's, you're right. I agree with you. This was not a good way that Darlene and I did it. We were married 12 years altogether. Oh my God, 12 years. I think that's an hour. And my throat it's felt a little bit, but thank you very much for watching.